Welcome back, everyone, to Progressively Incorrect. My name is Zach Groshell, and I'm your host. Today, we are going to be talking with Glenn Whitman and Ian Kelleher all about their work. And if you haven't heard of the CTTL and NeuroTeach and all of these topics, where have you been? It's going to be a great discussion for sure. But we're going to dive right into that right after a note from our sponsors, which includes John Catt from Hachette Learning. They publish some of the best education books, including my book, Just Tell Them: The Power of Explanations in Explicit Teaching. I always put a link in the show notes to their catalog, and they're always coming up with great new books. And if you yourself are looking for an opportunity to publish with someone, I would definitely get in contact with Alex and the folks over at John Catt. The other sponsor is StepLab, and I'm the director of StepLab North America, and we provide software and training for instructional coaching programs. I would check out the links in the show notes, come to some of our events, which are happening year round. Think about, how can I get myself trained up if you're an instructional coach, or how do I get my coaches trained up and myself trained up if you're an instructional leader? Let's get on over to our interview. I'm here right now, not in the flesh, but in the world of Zoom with Glenn Whitman and Ian Kelleher. Glenn, how are you doing? Let's start off with you.
Great to be here, Zach. Great to see our friend from the other side of the country.
Ian, how are you doing, man?
Oh, things are great. School year is going fabulously. Lovely to talk to you about it.
We're going to talk about something called the CTTL, which I think is an acronym. And I'd love you to bring us into this world by maybe starting with kind of the origin story. I feel like you guys are really like the pioneers when it comes to like spreading the stuff that I like, the science of learning. How did it all begin?
Well, the fact that you just called Ian and myself pioneer, I think I can just drop the mic and this podcast is over. I have confidence, but now my head might be a little big. But no, well, it didn't begin with the idea of a CTTL at all. If you ask probably me and definitely Ian, if we thought in 2025 we would be where we are in terms of our teaching and a research center, we would not have drawn this map. It really began. It's actually a great story. We were in a strategic planning process with St. Andrew's Episcopal School, which is in Potomac, Maryland, where we both still teach. We're a preschool through 12th grade school just outside of DC. And during the strategic planning process, a lot of people just read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. I don't know if people remember that. It was sort of one of the hot books in the independent school world. And we sort of had one of these questions, this generative question was, how do you take good teachers and make them great, and great teachers and make them expert? And I think we collected data, Ian. I don't remember, but I think we had over like 20-something ideas. And somewhere, and this we probably make up the story every time, but somewhere we decided, like, wouldn't it be interesting if all of us teachers, not just the learning strategist, not the learning specialist, not just the AP Psych teacher, knew a little bit about how the brain and mind learn. And we got on this journey that has been incredible. And very quickly along the way, I'm from New Jersey. I know my accent, but I found a tall Englishman in our science department. And I said, we got it. We're going to go for a ride.
And remember, this all happened 15 to 20 years ago. Like, learning science wasn't on anybody's radar back then. And if you think about all kinds of things were on people's minds trying to grab attention 15 or 20 years ago, why did the science of learning stick out? And I think soon after the exploration, it was just like, this can make me better. Like, this is the excitement of like something I'm missing here. And as soon as we started investigating, there are these great epiphany moments of, yeah, I see why I'm doing that. I could do that better. And that just launched this incredible journey.
You said it didn't start as the CTTL. What is the CTTL now these days?
Yeah. So the concept was in 2007. Again, so this is, for those of you who are listening in 2025, but hopefully people can be listening to this podcast long into history. The idea was, let's train 100% of our teachers. And the problem, first of all, we didn't even know what that meant, like what kind of training was out there. There were really two options: the brain targeted teaching model from Mariel Hardiman at Johns Hopkins, which is a fabulous resource, and she's been a great mentor to us. And there was the all kinds of minds work, which the research and the way they designed it still holds up pretty well. But we started down this journey, and I think Ian and I always agree on this. Like, really, the immediate impact was instructional variation, which I know, Zach, we all talk about direct instruction, but at some time, we all, when are we shifting the lift, and, what are the multiple modalities that exist in all our classes? It was about 3 years in, so about 2010, when we started to get these interesting phone calls to the school. They were like, do you have a book on this work? No. Workshop? Can we come visit? And we're like, no, like, we're just sort of playing with this and seeing where it goes. But it did look like there was an opportunity here to not only sort of formalize the center internally at St. Andrews for our great teachers, students, and prospective families, but then could we actually serve the larger educational community? Was the way I thought about it, Ian. And then right around that time, Ian and I were colleagues. Ian was in the science department. I was in the history department. I needed somebody with some research chops who, could look at data better than I could. And that's how, there's Lennon and McCartney out there. I would love this podcast, people talking about like Kelleher and Whitman in that sort of frame one day.
And I think I started with the point we quickly like ate up everything that existed out there and saw its potential, but realized like just hungry for more, but it wasn't there. And everything we were getting was written top down. It was from cognitive scientists and psychologists saying, teachers should do this, teachers should do this. There was nothing written in the teacher voice. And so I have a research science background. And so I did the litzer of like pulling, and it may have been the first teacher-driven science of learning literature survey in the US, pulling together all these core ideas. And then what does it actually mean for a real school? Like if I want to figure out what it means to a real teacher or real students, I can just like literally walk 3 yards that way and have a conversation. It kind of snowballed there from there because we realized no one's doing this. Like, why is nobody doing this? And I think, Glenn, we both had that experience at Learning in the Brain, that's sitting in the audience and thinking, how come nobody's told me this? And then I think we realized we could tell that story.
It kind of gets to the next question. So you build up, you build up the center, and it's been very influential because I've been to the Festival of Ed. Recently, Glenn, somebody from my school in Vermont told me that they were at your presentation. It's kind of funny. And then you talked about my book. It's sort of all these connections are happening. It kind of brings me to my next question, which is, I think early on in my career, I thought, I'm getting into the research. I'm reading like The American Educator and Dan Willingham, and then I got a PhD. I'm digging into these peer-reviewed journals. Why can't everyone else do this? And I think I sort of had to slow down and think like, to what extent do teachers need to be engaged in peer-reviewed research? To what extent, what do we mean when we say that teaching is evidence or research informed? Do you have like kind of a perspective on that? Maybe Glenn, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big milestone moments of our journey, it was one of those fortuitous moments. We got a call from a publisher and they were like, it seems like you guys have written enough small stuff. You want to write a book. And I actually remember Ian and I were sitting in my old office in the main building and we like, yeah, we think we can do this. But it brings up the question, Zach, you brought up. Okay, like what do teachers want to read? I also think teachers, they're very trustworthy, maybe too trustworthy. But like, if we could write a book that has enough level of research balanced with try this, not a curriculum, not a recipe, try this. That's what we were striving for with NeuroTeach. And I would argue, for me, I can speak from the I perspective, but I knew my content really well very quickly. I love the what of history, right? And I've never taken Ian's class. I've been in there a lot. It seems like he knows how to teach science. I'm just going to go on record. I don't know if I ever really knew like how to teach. Like I didn't know the pedagogy. And, I listened to Dan Willingham, right? I remember I was at a conference. I was like, that sounds like I should try that. And what I loved about Dan, and I think all of us, he always stopped short as a researcher, say, when the teacher raised their hand and said, okay, how do I use this in my class? He'll say, I don't know. Like, that's your job. So what Ian and I tried to do is come at it from the other side. Our job is to teach every day, right, kids? I just taught an hour ago, but I want to teach better. So what is the promising research? And this, we're good friends with David Daniel, and I think he really enculturated in us the idea. Almost all the research that we use at St. Andrews in my class or Ian's class or amongst our preschool through 12th grade colleagues None of it was done here. So it has potential because it's been studied somewhere else. It's a hypothesis that might work, but not until we try it out. And that's sort of what we say is research informed or evidence informed. Now, I know there's people, we have friends who are going to battle out, is it research, is it evidence? I don't want us, that should not be a barrier to entry. But again, there is, I'm about to go present somewhere else in the world. And I think there's enough research right now to make all teachers in this country think better about teaching. I don't know if we need more research. We need more application in our schools, the districts in Seattle, the districts in DC, and then see where it's working and it's not, under what conditions, things that we all do. So that's a long-winded answer, might be convoluted. Maybe the guy from England will explain it better. But I think that's where I stand. And NeuroTeach was designed to come from the teacher side and say, this is the research we think is worthy. We organized it in a certain way. Try it out in your context with your kids. I think that was one of our NeuroTeach stories, right?
Yeah, it was the book written by teachers for teachers didn't exist. We needed to be the ones who wrote it. Like between us, Glenn and I we've each taught in schools for 30 years. We've been in the science of learning for 15 plus years. Like, who better to do this translational work? And that's the key, that other professional fields have translational pipelines. Of course, we think of pharmacology first of all, but also medicine, but also soil science and animal husbandry and forest management. They all have research to practice translational pipelines as a specific field with people trained in that. But we don't in education. There's this weird research to practice gap. But in every school we've worked in, there are people who would thrive in that gap, who see the connections. Most teachers just do not have the bandwidth to do that. But there perhaps is room to create that translational pipeline where schools or districts have some expertise. Maybe they work with the coach system or the mentor system, so that there are translational experts. And the beauty of this work is part of the point of it is you're generating the next experts as you do it. For some people, it will, as they learn about the science of learning, putting it into practice in their classroom, that's the level where they want to be. But other people go, yes, I can see this. I want to be involved in this.
Yeah.
And but they typically have no pathways to use that talent to train others. So we're creating the people, but we don't have a system where we can use the people who can be those translational experts.
I feel this incredible weight of responsibility, because if they're trusting me, I come in here, they're trusting me that my view on something that I read actually was based on something that came from something. And then that thing that I'm not cherry picking that something so that I can drive home sort of my own personal ideology on how to teach something, right? And so I come in, and of course I'm in the realm of methods, of instructional methods, so it's already very controversial, right? It's like just where I'm talking about a different way of teaching, and I'm not saying you're not doing it, but I'm saying that there are certain things that you can rely on. And I have to go to my own experience, which is of teaching for 14 years. And I have to then go into what I've read and why I think the certain things I've read tell a story that points to that certain direction. It's sort of like, without recruiting them to do a little bit of their own reading and a little bit of their own, professional inquiry, they have to really just trust that what I'm saying is reliable. And I don't know how maybe you think about how to navigate that responsibility. It's just something that kind of weighs on me a little bit.
We create resources to do that because we live in this gap between research and practice. Highly practical, highly adaptable, don't have to use permission to do, easily understandable, easy to put into practice the next day. That's our secret sauce. Because I taught 2 hours ago, Glenn taught 1 hour ago. I'm going to go and work with students in a moment. That's what we do. We're able to digest it and not give people a sermon like, you have to do it this way, super prescriptive. But we know what is important in the research, and we can put that into these digestible, usable, adaptable chunks without losing the meaning and the nuance.
Yep. Yeah, but I agree with you, Zach. Like when, look, all three of us are in front of a lot of educators in a given year, right? In various different forms in the US and around the world. And first of all, I remind myself it's a privilege. I think it's important. And we're still unique. I mean, it's what has been amazing since we started this work is truly one, the number of great books and people who've entered the field, right? You included, right? Like we are still an outlier in that we're still in a school, we still teach. To come to visit the center, you have to walk through kids. Like that's a little different than almost everybody else out there. But again, when I'm in front of people, right, and Ian's in front of people, and you're in front of people, like when I say the word the research says, I always have a little like moment in my chest. And once I declare it's not heartburn, it's more like make sure your next lines are really important. Hopefully there's a citation on the slide, right? That's one. So, and I think teachers give a lot of trust. Hopefully some people in the audience are checking the citation. I've gotten that before. I'm sure we all have gotten that. But again, I worry about when I go to conferences and people just throw the word research out and then they keep talking. But I also worry about the cognitive load of research, right? I want teachers to try things pretty quickly and report back. So again, what's that delicate balance? We've all been classroom teachers. We're all in the field. It's why I love, Dan Willingham's book, When Can You Trust the Experts? Is a great title. David, Andrew Watson will say, he'll have like a little checklist around this work. The reason why we are where we are is not just because of our own work, is we've been able to cultivate amazing partnerships with researchers who are known around the world. Like Mary Helen Imaduna-Yang in USC, like she changed our thinking around emotion and cognition. David Yeager, who's doing great work on motivation, he'll give us some ways to think about this work, right? And when we can bring their names also into the space and they're known, it also helps credibility. But there's nothing we produce, even our neuromyth busting cards, they have a citation of the research. Yeah, we want to be really responsible.
I think that's like one of the reasons we have those relationships is how responsibly we've used everything and not overstating it and not overselling it. And it's not as if we're trying to get like super rich off this. It's clear we're doing it to help our colleagues get better, to help students get better, and apply this with some fearlessness and just see if it works. Like know what could be an indicator of success or not success. And in a highly iterative, recursive fashion, just try something out, because we read this stuff in research and it works in their context, but like your community, your subject, your voice of a teacher, your kids. I mean, it's a huge difference between my F block class and my B block class just because the kid's in the room. So what works for my F block doesn't work for my B block. So as teachers, we have to make these adjustments, but also like the scrolls don't know everything. Like the researchers who often parachute in these studies and do the study and then like zoom away again, it's kind of artificial. It's not really like what's happening in my classroom, and what I do is not different than Glenn's classroom. So it's on us to take it and mix it with our own professional wisdom and our own secret sauce and the knowledge of our community and our kids. And only teachers can do this work.
How do you make sure that the content that goes before them is really the critical, essential content? But also, like, how do you make sure that the lingo, the jargon, is not the thing that's just gonna really make this into this weird sort of academic garnish kind of exercise where it's actually focused on let's get to work, right? And so it kind of makes me think about the difference between sort of the neuroscientific explanation of things, the sort of neuro speak type of words, and then the more the analogy type of view of bottlenecks and boxes and stuff in the mind for the cognitive scientists. And then if you really want to get confusing, you go into the behavioral stuff, and now we're talking about antecedents and consequences. There are kids that need to be taught, it's like how do we bypass some of these weird mazes?
Yeah, it was fun. I love that. Great question. And a couple things. When we first got into space, we got lucky. We met a guy named Dr. Kurt Fisher at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And back then, I think it was like brain-based learning, and that sort of felt uncomfortable. Like anything based on concerned us. But he introduced us to this field that came out of Harvard Graduate School of Education called mind, brain, and education science. And we really, to be honest, I wish that has held up a little stronger. I love the science of learning. I get it. The learning sciences, I get it. But the MBE for us brought it really all together, right? I still think there's only a little from the neuroscience space that is informing my work as an educator. And it's really about the concept of neuroplasticity and myelination and some other things. But the cognitive science and behavioral psychology, education theory, and what MBE did, I argued really well, but I don't know if it's going to hold up for the long term in culture, is brought it all together. Now, if your audience actually was watching a video right now, over Ian's shoulder, you can barely see it, we have actually a professional word wall at St. Andrews. It goes to what you were saying, Zach. All of our trainings that we do something really unique. We think it's unique. I don't know if others will do it, but everybody can steal the idea. We usually do, we ask schools that we work with and districts that we work with to help us build their professional word wall. And we have 18 words or 20 words right now on our school's professional word wall, like cognitive load, formative assessment, myelination, amygdala. And you might, we would, if we put all of us in a room together with some adult beverages, like the 50 of our nearest and dearest, the debates would go on. It'd be a great night together. But we also want to break down, and we don't want to sort of dumb down the complexity of this work, but we also want to build up the language. So we do vocabulary, adult professional word wall building in our professional development work to actually address some of these more frequent words, like executive functions. Like, this is a great word. You ask an audience of 100 teachers to define executive functions, you're going to get 85 different answers. Most of them won't even have an S on functions. Right. So I would argue every teacher's an executive functions teacher needs to know the definition. So to concretize some of the vocab, we do actually in a playful way build it into our collaborations with schools and districts.
And we also field test everything here before we put it out to the general public. Our harshest critics are going to be our colleagues. We work with amazing, dedicated teachers committed to the cause, and they know us. And so we cannot put out rubbish in front of them. Like, I just owe it to our kids and my colleagues. Everything's field tested and tweaked before it goes public. And we've sat in some awful professional developments in our lives.
All of us, yeah.
And there's this slide we sometimes use. It says something like, "When I die, I hope it's at a teacher's professional development because the transition from life to death will be so subtle." And we set such a low bar for ourselves. One of the things when we started this journey was, let's create great professional development. It's like storytelling and emotion and fun and laughing. And yes, it's really serious things. And we're trying to change people's habits, and that's personal and very emotional. So what do we put around this? Yeah, there should be good food. There should be good snacks. We should treat each other like professionals.
It's something I heard from Doug Lemov because I went to his institute recently, and right before I said, like, what's your take on icebreakers and all these other things, right? And he said, well, I try not to be too goofy in this, but you know what? I really want everyone here to enjoy themselves. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like that kind of is like the overarching goal is like, even though we're talking about things that are serious and we can do it very systematically with lots of practice during the PD, I still want you to enjoy, like, I still want you to have come out here and had a satisfying experience.
No, but you talk about this, Zach, in your own work. Like, all our icebreakers are relevant, right? We do this fun thing called the blob tree just to get people thinking about emotion and cognition, right? And you talk about instructional design. I remember hearing you say this somewhere, like, you can have fun, but try to make it relevant, like to the work ahead or the work and go, which makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I'm curious, before we leave the world of like neuroscience, like the earlier in this podcast, people should go check it out. Kristen Simmers and Andrew Watson had a little debate where Andrew was taking kind of the approach of, let's just use educational psychology. There's very limited utility in neuroscience. Kristen, who's an absolute genius, I think she's done work with you. She's amazing. She took the more, hey, there are insights from neuroscience that illuminate and tell the story better, or at least fill in some gaps. What are your thoughts on that kind of that? It's sort of an inside baseball debate, but I think it's important for PD providers and for schools as they're kind of searching like where to start.
Well, it's funny. Like, I think everybody's had the same conversation with Andrew. Like, Andrew and I talk about, he has said to us, maybe go lighter on the neuro, right? It's actually, in our summer academy. So in July, we bring teachers from around the world to our summer academy. And we're very intentional early on. I think Ian did this last year to differentiate between the mind and the brain. Right. And to be honest, I would say that slide is dedicated to Andrew Watson in my mind. But I will say this about the neuro, and I said this just a couple minutes ago. I would argue that every teacher in the United States needs to know about neuroplasticity. And if you don't believe in the lifelong ability of the change of a kid, let alone yourself, then it's probably not the right career. And I would even argue, I would like us to talk about neuroplasticity ahead of like things like growth mindset, which again, sometimes it's been replicated, some not. And I'll speak from the I perspective. When I learned about neuroplasticity as a history teacher, I thought differently about my kids. When I started to learn about then things like myelination, and that got me to do retrieval practice better, right? When I learned about pruning, probably got me to do more retrieval practice for all I know. So I do believe, and I also think it's an interesting gateway because most teachers in the United States, they're not hired at any public or private or charter or school based upon what they know about the learning brain. The great irony of it is it's maybe one of the principal organs of learning, and a kid will never forget it. They will never forget the brain, right? So shouldn't we know a little bit more about both the brain and the mind? And I think it's a both and. And I know I can imagine we're all going to see Andrew soon, and hopefully he listens to the podcast. But he's made us think better about the debate. Certainly, I would say that's probably true for both of us, Ian. I would think.
Yeah. I mean, we've often used neuroplasticity as a gateway to get people to dig in this. That it's not actually as hard as you think, but also we know the job of a teacher is really important. But when you see the amazing potential of neuroplasticity and understand, it's not like just for superpowers. It can be for bad things too. It can ingrain bad habits too. But it opens up this potential of long-term change over time. If everybody in a school believes that, embraces the fact that the brains are constantly changing on their environment. And so if we teach in better ways, we can have a greater impact on our students. But it's it's about change over time, which really gets into that collective efficacy piece. And I think the other big piece that's important to know is that there's this indisputable link between emotion and cognition. And for example, now there's a lot of debate about what cognitive load theory really is and isn't, but there's also this neuroscience strand coming in and saying, we're starting to understand more about how working memory is happening in the brain, and there's this indisputable connection between emotion and that, and then the emotion systems, how they interact with that too. So there's these influences, but it means that we cannot separate out emotion from learning. And when I started teaching, I was like, as if I had a sign out outside my door saying, "Park your emotions here, strap in, it's chemistry time. This is about learning chemistry. Whatever you're dealing with, park it at the door." And then that's just crazy. Like, how do we reduce negative emotions? Like, for example, like stress has this massive negative impact on our attention systems, our working memory, long-term memory storage, long-term memory retrieval, decision making. And so creating environments that lower stress and where all students feel safe, known, heard, and that their story matters. Like, that is not just a luxury. That's not like SEL is not like a tag on, let's do this for fun now. It's a physiological part of how our brain works. And so it should be integral to learning, not a tack on.
Let's talk about that more. The emotional side of learning. I've increasingly been thinking about this. I keep making the joke that the counterpart to just tell them, which is really just about delivery, should be a motivation book like Just Engage Them or something, and then we kind of make fun of some of the bad ideas around motivation and emphasize the parts that work. Um, and I think, Ian, this came out of this question came out of a conversation we had in passing at Research Ed, where it was like, can't we all agree on certain things? It's not all woo woo. I think take this opportunity to like explain your views right now on this sort of this de-emphasized aspect of how we teach.
When I was doing my PhD, I was sitting in the space between 3 or 4 different classic disciplines, but I was solving problems that pulled things from everything, and I didn't really care where it came from. It was all about addressing the challenge in front of you, and it's similar here. I mean, I'm my heart is as a teacher. I'm in front of students every day. I want to do the best for my colleagues. I want to do the best for my kids. I don't care which field it comes from. I don't care which conference people go to. Like, one of the truly bizarre things is that Dan Willingham met Dylan William on the sofa that's like 10 yards from me, because even though they knew each other and they'd been corresponding, but conferences never put them in the same space at the same time. So because we have an understanding of how learning happens and how teaching happens, like a deep understanding both from the research side and the practical side, we feel in a position where we can just pull from whatever field contributes. And we understand the research enough to know how they play with each other. And we look out for places when vastly different fields start to say the same message. That's just good research practice. And we don't say, oh, this is all in line, but it gives us ideas that are worth exploring and ideas to test out. And so there's, if you look at the work from like Antonio Damasio or Mary Helen Imidino-Yang around, or Effort First, is starting to put these pieces together of how neuroscience effects could influence cognitive science and cognitive psychology. There's this really interesting part of that also aligns, if you sort of go back to some of those seminal studies like the Jeff Cohen, Carol Dweck, Greg Walton study out of Harvard around academic tenacity, like and all that great research there. This is all lining up from different fields if you'd like go deeply enough and read between disciplines.
I would it was funny, we were talking about this morning, Ian, a little. There's I've been collecting all the simple models of learning that are out there in the ether, right? Dan Willingham got us started, right? But there's a lot of different ones out there. And we have our own too. And I'm still amazed that ours differs a little bit. If I put the picture up, but it wouldn't. Yeah, I would put the picture up, but it wouldn't help your audience. So if you just take, and it's usually like something like environment, working memory, long-term memory, right, kind of picture, right? But we've wrapped ours with this idea of emotion. And I'm still surprised in the field that without sounding anything other than why, let's have a discussion about it, why everybody's simple model of learning is not wrapped by emotion right now. Like, again, and there are great ones out there. Like we were looking at Stephen Chew's today and Andrew Watson's and everybody. So I think though, when I first heard the phrase, and I think I heard it from Mary Helen Imidino-Yang, that we are feeling beings who think, not thinking beings who feel, that sort of threw me. I thought it actually was the other way around as a teacher. Now, I'm just going to name it, right? And that really changed a lot. So when I have a very rigorous history class, I think most students would say it's really high bar, high challenge, but amazingly high support, right? And it was probably too high bar, high challenge, and not enough high support 15, 20 years ago before we started on this, MBE science of learning track, because I didn't know how setting the right emotional climate, right, the right amount of stress is a condition for the challenging, effortful thinking. I don't know, I always struggle with that word, that we want kids to do. So it's my challenge for us in the field to keep thinking about this emotion and cognition and maybe present them too much in schools. I don't know, Zach, you've worked with more public schools than us, but too many times there's the SEL, social emotional learning PD, and then there might be the science of learning PD. What we think we've done really well, because we're teachers and we're school and we're a school-based center, is we do them at the same time, right? All our tools, everything's wrapped in together. And I think, there's not a teacher in the world who would not say, "Yep, I get it. That emotion matters." So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think we got there.
Like the simple model of learning, that most of us saw it first in Dan Willingham's book, but really it's been around since the mid-60s. Like Dan Willingham doesn't claim to have invented
No, yeah.
but it was like created 25 years before the first functional MRI. Like it's so like if that's our thinking, we've learned so much more about the interconnectedness of brain systems, even though that's like partway through the journey, and then. So we know there's this emotional connection, and then there's work like Greg Walton's seminal work around belonging interventions, where a 30-minute intervention, just 30 minutes, not only has an effect massively for that year, but the next year. And even if you go to 5 years down the line, there's still a really significant effect from that. And I think, how is that possible? And it's only possible because of the emotion cognition link and how it changes students' perceptions of learning and what the teacher's doing and what even this whole thing about education is. And so if we embrace that emotion has to play a role in learning, it has to be part of the mix, it starts to unlock some things that could be really transformative.
So what I do in my presentations is basically I explain some sort of principle and then I try to model an element of the delivery. And when I do that, I say things like we all know something that's true is that some people make boring things significantly more interesting sounding. Like, and some people and how do I codify that for you? And how do I involve you in terms of your personality and your ability to be natural, but also acknowledging an element that the best teachers, they just pause and they punch that one word, right? And they look around their classroom and they scan in this just really deliberate way. And you just, if you're standing at the doorway, you think you're like, what just happened? Are they in trouble? And no, they're leaning forward, like at this critical moment, waiting for that teacher to say that one, kind of break the news to them on the content. Um, it's, it's hard. It's hard to talk about this aesthetic or this style that's inside of the teaching. Maybe it's just easier to talk about the other stuff. I mean, is maybe that's my explanation for it.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? But I look, we have preschool through 12th grade here at St. Andrews. Two-year-old, you want to talk about emotions and developmental ranges, stages, and but I got to just tell you, to your audience, and again, I can speak from I'm an exponentially better teacher. Now, there's going to be researchers like, how are you measuring that, Glenn? Well, don't ask me that question. But I definitely feel like I'm an exponentially better teacher, and I think I get results because I think about emotion and cognition as like good wine and cheese, not mutually exclusive. And again, my bar is not. I would actually argue, and we'd like to say this. I actually think we can raise the bar, not lower the bar, if we can get that emotional climate right. Right. And I think that's something we strive for both at St. Andrews and the CTTL quite a bit. So, certainly more to come on that. Yeah.
I 100% agree. Like I've been teaching physics and chemistry, and there's kind of these classic first year curriculum. I know for sure that my bar is higher and more students feel they can meet that bar because I've been building social belonging and academic belonging by the classroom climate I create and by my pedagogy. Yeah, this is all about raising the bar.
Maybe it's also just harder to coach this stuff. Like if when I say, hey, like you needed to have a lesson plan, it sort of takes it off of them, right? We're focusing on this plan that you should have put into place. Let's look at like the sequence of the planning. Or when I say that like, I think you kind of presented too much, that's just a judgment on the information design, not on the teacher's sort of emotional design.
Right.
And it's way harder to say to a teacher in so many words, can you not be so mean? Like, can you actually be understanding of these children? Like, I'm curious now that I mentioned coaching. These elements of implementation and scaling, like what have you discovered as you've done this work when it comes to it's easy to teach teachers stuff and they know it and they can talk about it in a PD session, but then once the messiness of the classroom and all those kids they have to teach come into play, it kind of just it doesn't get implemented the way the presentation was intended.
Yeah. Well, look. There's great people around this world that are presenting the science of learning in so many great ways. Like we get it, we love presenting, but boy, we love going to the conferences. I think you nailed it though. Like our approach was, well, our approach is right. How do we begin or elevate the current knowledge of the science of learning a teacher has? Here's a couple of things we've learned as a center when we work with schools and districts. One is we overestimated early on where we could present promising research and strategies that in a series PD. We know one and done really not effective. But if we came back multiple times, we overestimated the ability of a teacher to go then do that in their calculus class, their seventh grade history class, without enough coaching. And what we've actually done much better as a center is we know adults need really good models and frameworks, and we design for that. Obviously models that show something working, maybe exemplars and non-examples are really good. But I think the one thing we've changed on is the adult learner's not a novice with the science of learning needs to be thought about a little like a novice learner in my history class. That's some ways we've changed our design of our professional development delivery in a couple other ways too. But I think we've learned a lot about what could change the adult learner brain. First of all, teachers were stubborn. We know that. It's really hard to change. But that's one way we've approached it. That comes to mind. Yeah.
I like the analogy to a good lesson. We've produced a lot of structure like a good lesson, but there's agency layered on top of that.
Yeah.
With teacher, and we're very good at helping teachers connect the practice to things in their class that they want to work on, or strategic initiatives in their school or district. Our summer academy is amazing, and one of the things it does is create translation group leaders, translational leaders who have this expertise, who can help their colleagues out. And so this self-generating of that translational expert or coach or mentor is a really big thing. We've also, when we're talking about scaling, one of the things we're really excited about is we've just finished building a large language model, an AI, which is, I could put in a Pinterest lesson plan and it will put out a science of learning infused lesson plan that it's a table of Pinterest version says this, how about do this instead? Here's the little Y. And it can do it for any grade, any subject. It can give you a 5-week unit outline. And experienced teachers can take a bit and you'll learn a bit about the science of learning. You take a bit of this, maybe leave that, use it to inform what you do. But if you're a straight out teacher, it's an unbelievable way. Yeah. And so this is like prototype phase, but if you know an investor or you want to help invest in us, as we make this big, but AI used responsibly in a super targeted way, can help us scale.
Yeah. I'll add to that, Zach, we've seen each other at Research Ed, we've seen each other at Festival of Education. Every conference has retrieval practice now, right? Every conference has cognitive load, formative assessment. I think I'm hopefully this brings work for you. I think we need to think a little more micro. Like I still think we got to talk, and I was just talking to Gene Tavernetti about this, who I know you were all friends with. We got to talk more about instructional design. I think we could probably agree on 5 or 6, 7 ideas or principles that we would like to see in almost every class, right? The order could be different and yes, they're adaptive, but really, how does that work in a 40, 60, 90-minute period? I still think at the conferences I've been going to, I would like us to talk more about instructional design side by side, the strategies that are being suggested. And I feel like unless we start doing that a little more, and you are certainly highly qualified, Zach, to do this, I think we're going to still be disappointed about the impact on the backside. And the other thing is, this is to all our friends. I'm still waiting for the day when we all get on a Zoom and can agree or something. Where we're missing is, I think we're bringing good, promising strategies to the world. I think we're giving some good ideas how to use it, but we have not created a way to collect a database or something to say how to measure it and is it working? Not action research, not random control trials, something that a teacher can do within their locus of control. I really would like to see that back end evolved. And maybe we can all get together, or some people get together and think about what are those 5 or 6 sort of observational research questions that maybe can start creating that, that knowledge base.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I mean, I think everyone listening, I think go to Festival of Education, go to Research Ed. We're not saying it's as the movement evolves, you start wondering like how many more simple model of the mind from Willingham presentations can I sit through? How many times am I going to hear the same thing when I'm not looking for novelty in this. I'm looking for insights that are specific and that are field tested. And I'm looking to you guys because you're teaching, and I'm looking to folks who really, really care about the craft of teaching and lesson design to connect the dots for people this is their first time in this,
Yeah. No, look, if you watch if you can do a comparative study between my class today and my class 15 years ago, we're studying Salem 1692, the witchcraft trials right now, right? So I love the book. You can talk about 3 periods in history at the same time, 1690s, 1950s, and the current year, right? But, I'm using more formative assessment, right? There's no doubt about it, right? I think about belonging much, much better. I am trying to have the kids think harder than me more often, right? I mean, things that, I probably thought like a good class is I speak the most. Very tangible ways. If you walked into Ian's physics class or chemistry class, you would see us really trying. Where are the metacognition moments, right? There's talk like metacognition is a really low cost, highly impactful. But where do you do it? Do you do it at the beginning? Do you do it after an assessment? Like these are questions the center tries to solve for our own teachers. Let's not assume we can talk about cognitive load and retrieval practice, and a teacher knows exactly what to do the next day. Let's help them and reduce their cognitive load in doing it. Maybe that's my mantra today. I don't know. Yeah.
And I feel like I'm doing in any class 12 to 20 science of learning moves, all kind of combined in ways. But if we just look at it from the researcher point of view, like I'm doing this 5-year study on retrieval practice. I'm only focusing on retrieval practice. I'm like forgetting everything else. But that's not how teaching works. We're constantly mixing things together and pulling things from our toolkit. And so we help teachers build really fantastic toolkits because no lesson plan I've ever made has exactly worked out as it was. There's always pivoting, and that's part of the joy of it, right? I've just gotten better at filling my toolkit and just having a lens that I can understand things better. But where do those meetings happen? Like, that's great. We do our summer institute. It's a great place for people to come together and share those stories and share that knowledge. But there's so much money being spent in professional developments and conferences and workshops that don't get to the heart of it. Like, as you're saying, Zach, those like details of just, so what does it actually look like? Yeah, where does that happen?
Yeah. I think we got a lot of work to do. The thing is that people see us doing like the one thing at Research Ed, and you guys probably get around more to the conference circuit than I've been doing. But like that thing that I did on a Thursday with this school, where it was me thinking on my feet with a group of principals or whatever, and we did it together. Those moments are they're just living in my own little journaling land. And I wish we could somehow get that to be at the conference, that to be scalable, those personalized moments where we actually came to some consensus together. It's just really hard to codify that, I guess.
And we're bringing in professional practice and professional wisdom that isn't canonical in the research scriptures to influence that. Because for us to move on as a field, we have to do that. But it's as though educators haven't owned the science of learning yet. And I feel we're just at this point where we're wrestling control. Like if we could get probably anyone who's listening to this podcast out in somebody give us lend us a resort in Colorado for a weekend, just hammer out what is the science of learning defined from the educator perspective. Like what does it include? How do we work it? What could it look like, different subjects and different divisions? We've never had that moment. We haven't defined the framework. We don't know where the pinch points are.
Glenn, Ian, it's so fabulous to have you on the podcast. You're of course invited back anytime. We're gonna keep updating folks on this work. I just think it's so important. It's for every kid who needs a great teacher in front of them throughout the day, who cares about them, who's also bringing them really effective, slick practices. This is important work.
That's why I do it. It's the look on kids' faces and getting that more often. It's early in the year. Like some kids are still having a hard time, and just knowing that I can do it.
You actually reminded me of one of my favorite lines in all the work is that in the United States and around the world, a student has to get lucky in the schools to have the teacher understands the science of learning. And I think what we're trying to do as a center, I know you're trying to do it, all our great friends out there are trying to do it, is to normalize the science of learning. And I also think it's doable. It's a big lift, but it is doable. And I think even during these times, it's not only doable, it's really necessary for our kids.
When I got into teaching all that time ago, I thought it would be temporary. And then just spending time with students and like that privilege of watching their journey, there's just nothing like it. It's hard, but that privilege to make a difference in kids' lives. And so when I discovered the science of learning, that was it, because I could make a bigger difference in kids' lives.
Absolutely agree. And with that, listeners, I really appreciate you tuning in to this podcast. Check out the links in the show notes I put in to be able to connect with Glenn and Ian. They're doing amazing work. Like I said, pioneers, and they're continuing to innovate in this space because they never tire of trying something out and trying to solve this problem. And if you could please pass this podcast around to a principal, to a colleague, I just want to get the word out beyond the normal channels. So your help and giving the 5-star and giving a comment and all that stuff, it really does help support me, and I'll just keep on churning out these episodes on a weekly basis. Thank you so much, Glenn and Ian. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Zach.
Anytime. Thanks for the friendship, Zach.